Sometimes when we read back over our notes, we'll say, oh, do you remember that you did that? Because, I've murdered Dave in the past. Yes, we've been husband and wife several times. I've been his sister. I've been his neighbor. And, Dave, I don't know, Dave, do you want to jump in on this?
Most of our experience has been spiritual. However, that means because I was a physician, we dove into all of the scientific stuff that we could find that would kind of explain it. Because to start with, I thought this spiritual experience that we had during meditation must mean that I was losing some sort of connection with reality. But I started doing the research. We found research by Ian Stevenson. We found out that they've been doing reincarnation research for 60 years. There's some 1,800 cases, maybe 2,400 cases now that have been documented, mostly in children using spontaneous memory.
Are you curious about discovering ways of making your life better? Then welcome to my podcast. I'm Bob Nickman, and this is The Exploding Human. Listen in while I talk with all kinds of people in the fields of personal growth, health and healing, alternative therapies, psychology, spirituality, environment, and the future. I'm looking for those answers that make life better for everyone. You'll meet cutting-edge practitioners, doctors, artists, filmmakers, business people, and those who have overcome challenges. The brave, the curious, anyone who is out there helping us humans to explore, expand, and explode. Hey, welcome to The Exploding Human. I'm Bob Nickman. My guests today are Dr. David Bettenhausen and Carla Bogni-Kidd, and we are going to be talking about past lives. Fascinating topic today. Before we get into that, I want to invite you to visit my website, theexplodinghuman.com. Also, subscribe to the YouTube channel, The Exploding Human with Bob Nickman. Add the with Bob Nickman. You can check out the episodes on my Facebook page, The Exploding Human. And also, I'm starting a series of interviews. My friend Mark, who helps me book the show, is interviewing me about myself. So if you want to find out more details about what I've been up to in the past and currently, check that out on Patreon. That's Patreon, patreon.com/The Exploding Human, and some exclusive content there. Appreciate that. And I am so happy to be presenting this episode. It was a fascinating interview with David and Carla. Briefly, they had a meeting, and they're going to talk about this, when they were 3 and 4 years old, realized it many years later. They met again when David took over a practice. He's a physician, and Carla was the office manager, and they realized that they had met many, many, many decades prior. And David began to meditate as a way to lose weight. He had some weight issues, and when he was meditating, he started to have these spontaneous memories of past lives, and they both realized after some time that they had had past lives together. So we're going to talk about that. I personally have had a couple of hypnotherapy sessions where I did past life regression, so I have some experience with this myself and found it to be very valuable. This is a couple of notches more intense than my experiences. Maybe intense isn't the word. Maybe it's more specific and more studied. Really amazing stuff. I hope you enjoy it. I don't want to say too much more. This is Dr. David Bettenhausen and Carla Bogni-Kidd. Here we go. We're talking about past life regression, and Carla was just saying about the multitude of experiences that her and Dave have had together and how confusing that can be. Let's start with that.
Well, it's very confusing. Well, I'll just give you the brief rundown. We started meditation because we were stressed out in 2014, and there's huge benefits with meditation, as you well know. And Dave was a physician, and I worked for him. He was 116 pounds heavier than he is right now. Through meditation, he lost weight because he found self-worth and self-awareness. But through that, when we started to meditate, we found that we had not only had 29 past lives together, Dave had 42 past lives, I had 34, and they span over 6,000 years. And you and I and Dave were just talking about your experience, and it's so confusing. We journal so much because there's so much information that Dave is able to retrieve. Dave has a gift. I guess if you look it up, you would call him a mystic. And he can speak with the spiritual world just like you and I are speaking right here. So the details that we have in our books are incredible. We have our names, what we died from, our astrological signs, our birthdays, where we lived. But it does get confusing. And sometimes when we read back over our notes, we'll say, oh, do you remember that you did that? Because, I've murdered Dave in the past. Yes, we've been husband and wife several times. I've been his sister. I've been his neighbor. And, Dave, I don't know, Dave, do you want to jump in on this? Do you have anything to say?
Bob, we'll even back up a little, because all of these lives and all of these things, I can even understand, because people say, why doesn't everybody remember all their past lives? Well, if you did, it would be too confusing. You can't remember a whole set of lives, let alone this life. And I don't remember necessarily what I had for breakfast. But the reality here is we start getting so many details, so many lessons. And I'm going to tell you that most of our experience has been spiritual. However, that means, because I was a physician, we dove into all of the scientific stuff that we could find that would kind of explain it. Because to start with, I thought this spiritual experience that we had during meditation must mean that I was losing some sort of connection with reality. But I started doing the research. We found research by Ian Stevenson. We found out that they've been doing reincarnation research for 60 years. There's some 1,800 cases, maybe 2,400 cases now that have been documented, mostly in children using spontaneous memory. Well, our first experiences were all spontaneous memory during meditation. Then we went and got past life regression training with Dr. Brian Weiss, because we wanted to understand. Then I did more research on the science. And we find out that not only during meditation, during dreams, during past life regression hypnosis, we actually access the subconscious. We have the same beta, theta, delta waves that all get connected during those time frames. And so all of the science sort of backed the experience that we were having, which made me feel like maybe I wasn't quite as crazy. I'll tell you, the first real past life experience, I actually woke up in the middle of the night after we had started meditating, fell out of bed, hit the lamp next to my bedside table. The lamp fell on me. But the dream, or the memory, was that I was standing in an alley. And I looked across the alley and I could see Carla. Now, I say I see Carla, but the reality is Carla looked sort of like Carla.
Go ahead and say it. I was younger, cuter, thinner. He throws this in every time.
Okay.
She still had beautiful steel blue eyes. How about that? But she was dressed like a flapper. I saw flashes of light, and then I felt a thud against my chest, and I fell back, and I realized I had been shot in this alley looking at this blonde flapper. Over the next weeks, every time I meditated, another memory came of that. And I found out that I met the flapper at a wedding in Chicago. Then I found out that I met the flapper at that wedding and that she worked for a mobster named Angelo. I knew it was in the 1920s. When I met her at this wedding, the next day we went for a walk along the beach, and the flapper told me her name was Ruby Donaldson. She'd been born in Georgia, moved to Chicago. I'm telling Carla all these details, and Carla goes onto Ancestry.com and finds Ruby Donaldson, born in 1904 in Bullock, Georgia. She starts doing research on Chicago, and she finds out that Angela Jenna was a mobster right before Al Capone. Now, I had never heard of Angelo Jenna. She kept doing the research. She found a wedding announcement for Angelo Jenna January 10th, 1925, which was the wedding that I met her at. All these details were happening. We actually got to the point, because I could remember Ruby Donaldson's apartment, that we actually left Ohio, where we're living now, and drove to Chicago, to Little Italy, walked down a road. I turned a corner and looked and said, there's Ruby's apartment. And we found the building. And a friend of ours did some research and found out the building was built in 1899 and has been an apartment building in Chicago ever since. We had a whole set of verifiable facts that related to a memory. And then we had a day where I was sitting with Carla and telling her more of the memory. And suddenly Carla started finishing my sentences, because she knew the questions J.J. Wright, that was my name in that life, was going to ask her, and she answered the question. And we both started having the same experience.
That was wild.
And that was crazy, because then not only did she have a memory of me in the past, I had a memory of me in the past. We had all this research that we were looking at, the science behind some of it. And suddenly we were off, and we kept meditating and, writing down more past lives, more stories. Then we went to train with Dr. Brian Weiss, because other people were doing that. And probably the best thing we learned was that there were more people like us that were having the same experiences.
That is very clear and specific, much more so than my experiences with the 2 past life regressions I did. I wonder if the heightened moment of a being shot creates a stronger memory. If events that are very heightened do that, because it's almost like it's trauma in a sense. That
yes, traumatic.
Yeah. So
and if you do past life regression, a lot of people come up with their traumatic memories first, because they're easier to remember.
Yeah, that was kind of my experience. I mean, it's particularly one of them, but I've been reading a little bit about sound healing, and what they talk about there is that they talk about the biofield, and that we're electromagnetic energy, and that memory the older the memory, a little bit further out from the body they reside in this electromagnetic field. I don't know if that's true or not true, but it's an interesting idea that, where do these memories exist? Do they exist, in the mind, or are they in some other electrical field, a spiritual field? It's a really interesting thing and that you're able to access that. And I think maybe everyone is capable of that on some level, but obviously you have a certain gift here.
Yes, Bob, just to comment on what you just said, you'll hear lots of different theories in this area, but if we go back to a lot of the reincarnation research, and if we go back to some of the science, we know learning occurs in the subconscious, and the subconscious already records every single experience as either negative or positive. That's how the conscious mind kind of packages things. Then if we go to some of the reincarnation research, which looks like that there's a conscious stream that continues to follow us, that is outside of the physical mind, then that stream, or soul, as some of us might want to call it, exists in some sort of field that is not physical. If you want to call that an electromagnetic field, I could almost go with that. I mean, because it exists in some space that's not physically defined.
It's energy.
And if you look at some of the reincarnation research by Ian Stevenson and Jim Matlock that's out there, it's probably that reincarnation is some sort of evolutionary step where this non-physical portion of reality has learned to connect to the physical portion of reality. And at some period of time, and for us, that time period seems to be 6,000 years ago, because Carla and I both have memories that are 6,000 years old. That appears to be an evolutionary step. And that's sort of a step for most people when you do past life regression. It's somewhere close to 6,000. Now, we know other people have reported experiences that are older than that. But that seems to be an approximate evolutionary time frame when most past lives occur. I have in-depth discussions with some people that believe that there are lives on other planets, lives from 10,000 years ago and 2 million years ago, and those kind of things. But in general, our experience is that it seems to have occurred 6,000, 7,000 years ago. And if you look at some of the reincarnation research, it really doesn't support memories that are older than that. It seems that the reincarnation research actually points to a very linear time frame, that every life follows another one. And some of those are arguments against some of the quantum physics discussions that we hear on this. However, all of the experiences that we've had have a lesson tied. It seems to be somewhat karmic related. Certainly, all of our spiritual experiences have been karmic related. And our experiences even include God, source, Tao, creative, something that started this experience.
And in our first book, we tell the story of 21 of our past lives. And at the end of each one of those lives, we actually give our reasoning for returning again, what we did incorrectly in that life or negatively in that life, and why we came back again. We weren't perfect human beings. Apparently, we're slow learners.
Well, yes. I mean, I've always had I'm not even going to say belief, the knowledge that I've been here before. I've always, and in fact, and I've said this before in my podcast, I remember my birth in that going from this dark place with this tremendous force of energy. The first moment was kind of shock and almost fear, not really. And then this thought, it was an inner laugh, and it was, oh yeah, this again. And I always,
absolutely,
yeah. And so, you know, and I kept that to myself, of course, because it was just too strange to say to anybody, but I always knew it. And then I started to talk about it later. And so I don't know what that meant, but it's something I just know.
Well, and I think there is part of that. And after having this experience, there's some things that we just feel like we know.
Yes.
You know, we are in it, an infinite being that has multiple experiences, multiple existences that don't end. The death in this plane doesn't stop. That there is some sort of purpose to all of this. There are lessons that are learned. You know, we were talking a little earlier before coming on that you had a past life where you were a woman and realized that at that time in history, women were certainly a second-class citizen. And Carla's had some of that same experiences. As we went back and looked through her lives, she's been sold, traded, married off without permission. That's a common experience for women throughout history. That's one of those lessons where we can't be controlled.
I don't really like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's not a lot of fun to being sold.
No, not at all.
And if we look back at some past lives in a row, for me, I can find where we've been fighting on one side of a war and then died, came back, was fighting on the same side, the opposite side of the same war. Again, there's some karmic experience there. You're really fighting yourself. And fighting both sides. We've been Scottish fighting English, English fighting Scottish. I've been Muslim in the past, and I've been on the Crusades fighting the Muslims. You start to look at some of those lessons and you realize everybody really has to fight on each side. And much like you said earlier, there's a word called compassion. And karma is really that lesson of compassion. If you don't live the other side, how do you truly understand it?
We've all been kings, queens, saints, sinners.
Mm-hmm.
Slaves. Yes, slaves, slave owners. We've all done it. That's how we learn. That's how we learn that compassion. Dave and I have not been, I've always been a female and he's always been a male.
Oh, okay.
But a lot of people have said that they did have an experience like yours. And obviously it's for a reason. Maybe the life previous to you being a female, maybe you were not treating a female very nicely. So they showed you what it was like on the other side. Correct?
It's totally possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now yes.
Now, where did you guys have known each other since the 90s? Is that when you met?
Correct. We'll tell you
the story, Dave.
Story. Yeah.
Because I found that interesting that you've been linked for a really, for thousands of years in this reincarnation life. But how did you meet now in this current incarnation?
So we're going to tell you part of the story. In 1998, I bought a medical practice and Carla was the office manager. We hit it off as best friends right away, and I've relied on her for the last 22 years. That's just part of the story. And she's the one who encouraged me to meditate, and it's made a big difference in my life as far as physical health, mental, and all the spiritual things that have happened to us. While meditating, early on, I had a memory. Now, back in 1962, my father, we lived in Nebraska, returned to graduate school, and we drove from Nebraska all the way across the country to Boston. I don't remember much because I was 3. The memory I had while meditating in Boston was that we went to the beach, and I had never seen the ocean. And I was this happy, playful 3-year-old boy running on the beach. I could see Ferris wheels in the background and roller coasters and little colored, cars and buckets and feet hanging. And I was explaining this memory to Carla, and I said, and then this little girl came and pushed me down. And she screamed and said, "You're bothering my family." She sat on my chest. She kissed me on the forehead. She jumped up and she put both hands on her hips and looked at me. And she had this little blue 2-piece bathing suit with ruffles and a little round pot belly that was sticking out. And Carla looked at me and said, "Oh my God, that was me." Because somehow, and Carla can tell you the story, but somehow Carla and I were connected, and she lived in Boston and I lived in Nebraska, and we met when we were 3 and 4. Never knew each other again, but somehow we're reconnected. again in 1998 in Ohio.
Mm.
So in some way, shape, or form, we were always meant to meet, always pulled together. Carla, you should tell the story a little bit about the blue bathing suit.
Well, the reason I remembered that story, and I didn't require meditation to remember it, we were raised as the good Catholic family. My parents had they had 6 daughters. One had died early on, but I was the youngest of the girls. And my parents were always getting separated and back together. And this particular day, they had gotten together. We didn't have a car. We were not well off. My father got 2 cabs, and we all went to Revere Beach. And Revere Beach wasn't just a beach. There was amusement park and all the little souvenir shops and all of those things connected with it. So when Dave started to explain the area, my sister worked in the office with us, Paula. We both said, well, that's Revere Beach. But I remember the day because when we got there, I didn't have a bathing suit. I never had new clothes. I always inherited my sister's clothes, but for whatever reason, I didn't have a bathing suit. And we all went across the street to one of those little souvenir shops, and I got my first brand new bathing suit. It was blue, 2-piece, ruffled. And yes, my pot belly stuck out, but so was yours. Anyway,
you were young. You were young.
Yeah, I was young. But anyway, I always remembered that because the family was together. We had a fun day. And when Dave said it, the chill went up my back and Paula's, because we both said to him simultaneously, when did you live in Boston? All of those years, he had never mentioned that his father went to Boston to get his master's. It was just one of those very strange, eerie experiences, but always meant to be.
You remember pushing him down and kissing his forehead?
I didn't remember that part until 2 years ago when I had regression therapy, because, Dave has gotten all of these memories, and mine as well, through spontaneous memories. We never did regression therapy until 2 years ago. And through that, I saw the whole thing. It was fantastic. And, the sister, just a little older than me, was pouting because I got a new bathing suit. The oldest sister was pouting because she had to be with us and not her friends. Relived the whole thing. It was really funny. And he wasn't just yelling. He was screaming like an obnoxious little 3-year-old running down the beach, just like this. Ah! That's why I pushed him down and said, stop disturbing my family. Anyway. Something you don't forget.
Wow. Say the names of your books so people can take a look at this stuff. And if you're skeptical, that's a good thing, because skepticism is healthy skepticism is a very positive thing.
Yes.
That forces you to take a really close look, and a healthy skeptic has an open mind is my approach to this stuff.
I agree.
Me too. So our 2 books are The Gift of Past Lives, The Gift of Past Lives with Mother Isabella, God, and Elizabeth. The second book is actually Hell No Reincarnation. And Carla and I were both raised Catholic, and we kind of had to go through, and I documented some of the research. We documented religious history, plus we included 7 more of our past lives. Well, and Bob, what we found out is not only because we've seen so many lives, we've seen time between lives so often. And I've actually had the privilege of seeing my dad, who passed away a few years ago, his last past life review, and saw sort of how some of the things fit together. Just because we've done this enough, we knew that my father had been a slave trader in the past, and they reviewed part of that life with him, how he had chained people into the bottom of his boat, how he had split families apart. In the next life, he came back and he actually lost his wife and one of his daughters in that life, one through pregnancy and one through being kidnapped. So he actually had to feel what it was like to lose part of his family. And in this life, they showed him, because my father really was a very wonderful man in this life.
Mayberry RFD.
My upbringing was sort of perfect, good parents, all sorts of positive things. But my father got Parkinson's very young and spent the last 20 years of his life chained to a wheelchair. And my spirit guide, Isabella, said, can you see what happens? Because he really had to learn what it was like to be controlled, like he had controlled others. And he really did very well to overcome that, because he remained positive and upbeat, even if he couldn't quite do it while stuck in a wheelchair. He couldn't do everything he wanted. He could still be a good human, which is all part of most of these lessons.
Yeah, I always wonder about the struggles in this life, working out things that you didn't work out in a different life, because it seems like we all have these things that are sticking points to growth that just, they're really hard to change, for me, I'm incredibly defensive. That's just and where did that come from? And why is it such a difficult thing for me to that's my first response, is to defend if somebody says something.
Bob, when's your birthday?
It's February 25th.
Well, I'm so surprised that you defend your ego, because you're a Pisces. However, part of that is because Pisces people want to be accepted. They need to be accepted. They have to have people like them. And you're defending yourself because you want people to like you. It's pretty simple.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
I'll go with that.
Yeah. We love Pisces people. Dave is a Pisces and I'm a cusp. Yay.
A Pisces crises.
There you go. Yeah. We've had those.
If there's some karma and there's some past lives, and which means you're going to return, you need to take care of the world we live in, because you're going to return to the same one. So if we're destroying our planet and polluting our planet and doing those things, this is the most direct karma, because you're going to return in the next life and you're going to come back to this world that you left it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's kind of ironic, isn't it, for the people that don't see that?
Yes.
It's like, I'm going to pollute the water, then I'm going to come back and drink it and get sick.
Correct.
And why would they be happier to think that they're just going to die and that would be it? No reason, nothing. You just get up there and hope. Oh, I hope I did good.
Yeah. And I always wonder about people that do things that are destructive in that way. Do they not care about their own children and grandchildren? Do they not have them? It's like, yes. This selfish type of short-sighted behavior doesn't take into any account of loving your children and grandchildren. It doesn't make sense. It completely does not make sense to me.
Well, the ego has a lot of traits that follow under ego. I mean, conceit, selfishness, it's all ego. And if people can get past that, and I don't understand why people need to be right. How do you learn if you don't learn from somebody else? Why do you need to be right about everything?
Maybe it feels like, I think most of those types of actions, I think people feel if they're not right, they'll be destroyed in some way. It's like, if I'm not right, then I'll be weakened. And if I'm weakened, I'll be killed. I'll be destroyed.
But to be destroyed is the best thing ever, because we grow through adversity.
Yeah.
And again, Bob, you've had past life regression, so you realize to be destroyed or to die actually returns you to a place that's more comfortable than here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the next time, but not yet.
I hope I graduate.
There has to be some purpose that we're here. So if we don't think we've quite finished our purpose, we're not ready to go yet.
Yes, I feel like that this is part of my purpose. Doing this, getting this kind of information to people is really feels right to me.
That's why we do it. It's those 5 simple rules for living that are in book 1. If you don't live without conceit, selfishness, jealousy, and if you're not always forgiving and not always loving, you're going to repeat. You won't overcome your karma.
Where can people go to do this work, and what what are the ultimately wonderful benefits that people can get from it?
You can actually, with today's technology, Google past life regression therapists. You'll find more than two, but there's two main groups in the United States. And there's enough crossing between the two because a lot of people have trained both. There's the quantum healing therapists, which all talk about incredibly deep hypnosis. And Dr. Brian Weiss, who says hypnosis really doesn't have to be near as deep as you think. From your own experiences, you realize that you're actually in control.
Oh, absolutely. You're very aware during the whole process of what's going on. Yes. Absolutely. Totally.
And that's Dr. Brian Weiss's approach. He was a psychiatrist who first started doing regression therapy, looking to see if somebody had a childhood trauma that was causing their current life problems. And he took a few people back to their childhood, and then they went farther back. And as they went farther back, he found sometimes if you approach something in a life before this one, you can actually heal some of the problems in this life. Other people have expounded on that. The Dolores Cannon quantum healing, they try to go to a level of almost somnolence so that the person is very, very deep. They think they can reach a deeper level. But the reality is, I think they're still reaching the same subconscious level. Mm-hmm. They find past life traumas. There are people who have had neck injuries in the past who see their past life trauma, and some of their neck injuries or neck pain seems to go away. There are certainly past life traumas that follow you to this life. Even some of the research finds scars or birthmarks in the same place that people had a past life trauma. So if they were shot, they might find a birthmark where the bullet wound was. That's a lot of the research, again, with Ian Stevenson and Jim Matlock. So we know that there's some sort of soul memory that pulls forward. If you address some of the soul problem in the past, it heals the current present moment. If you didn't quite understand it in the last life and you haven't quite addressed it, you may be addressing it still in this life. So if you were extremely conceited and controlling of others in the past life, you may be in a situation in this life where you feel like you don't have any control. All of those things, if you start to address that you don't feel like you have any control in this life, and you saw that you were in control in the last life, you might even see not only where you made decisions that were incorrect, trying to control people, you start to learn in this life that you're making the same decisions, allowing people to control you. Again, it heals that situation because you realize in all reality, the only one responsible for you is you.
You know what's interesting about what you're saying? I guess it's a karmic type of a thing, that the self healing idea over long periods of incarnations. But I remember somebody saying to me, you choose your parents. And I thought, what does that even mean? What do you mean? What if you had parents that were just, really awful people? And you're like, why would somebody choose that? It's almost like victim blaming in a sense, but then it isn't. If you look at it in a karmic way, did you choose these people on this other level to learn?
Yes.
Correct. And I think you're catching something there. And the reality is, so many people think we get to choose everything.
Mm-hmm.
You can't possibly choose everything. There has to be a system, a creator, some overlooking entity that guides you on this path. Because, people say, well, you choose your parents. Well, what happened if your parents decided they weren't going to choose you?
Good point.
Good point. Somewhere that there has to be something assigned that you don't have choice of.
And Dave, explain why that would happen.
Well, of course, if you needed to have a karmic relationship fixed,
like Angelo and myself in this life.
Mhm.
correct. If you weren't placed in the same location, you would have no chance to address that karma. Now, the only way you can address that karma is by having free will. So it's all set up very delicately, because without free will, you can't make the choice not to be controlled or to control. You can't even make a choice to love if you don't have free will. Because without free will, it's not a choice.
I was just thinking, I had this moment just now that a memory of my dad. He did this was a total joke. He would call you into the room and he'd go, "I order you to love me."
Aw,
It was so sweet. I just, I always thought that was one of the funniest.
I like your father.
Yeah.
That is so cute.
Yes.
Wow.
Yep. Get in here. I order you to love me.
Oh, wow. He must have been fun.
Well, in those moments, he sure was. Yeah. He liked to laugh.
Mhm.
And he's one of those people that visits me in dreams more so than others.
That's another great point. If we
Mhm.
go back, we look at things, at least I do, from being a physician, trying to look at things that all seem to parallel each other and make sense. People who have these near-death experiences, they report going through the light, something that's like a birth canal, or the light that seems to be the same report that people say when they're being born. They return, there are spiritual beings, they see their family again. That's the same report that people talk about when they do past life regression and they see the time between lives. It's the same thing that kids who have these spontaneous memories that are studied by all the researchers. They go back and they ask the kids, and the kids say, "Yeah, I went back and I saw some of my family waiting for me, and I wanted to return to my parents again."
Mhm.
All of those experiences are like experiences, which means they're at least more probably true experiences when we start comparing the things that are alike in those experiences. That's one of the reasons we start to look at all these kids that had past life memories. Kids who have past life memories don't make up stories. They can't fill in the stories. They aren't capable of quite creating the same imaginary things that adults can.
Right. And they don't have information, knowledge of
Mhm.
things unless they already have experienced it.
Correct. And so when we go back and we study past life regression, we kind of have to almost use it as it's pretty good information. It's probably not 100% accurate, because if you've lived 60 years and you get past life regression, you have 60 years of experience to pull from. I can say I'm in a past life and it seems to be Egyptian because I've seen Moses on television and I know the pharaohs were Jesus, and the pharaohs existed.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Mhm.
So I could fill in part of the details. Well, the parts you fill in can be maybe not as accurate.
Right.
Mhm.
Little creative license there. I was just wondering when you were I guess you're retired now as a physician.
Officially.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just since
And
January.
and Carla worked in your office is what I
Correct.
read.
Mhm.
Did you guys ever bring this stuff up with patients who were having issues that or would that be just like too risky?
It
Well,
was way too
That's
risky.
yeah.
And
Yeah,
Bob,
I've lost most of my family over all of this. They think I'm nuts because, of course, they were raised Catholic,
Yeah.
and they believe that when you die, that's it, you're dead, and you're going to heaven or hell.
which
And
means that
to me,
we
that
fall
never
in the
made any
class. Yeah,
sense.
that means we fall in the classification of probably going to hell. Yeah.
You know that.
Which I'm already in living here with this family, but anyway.
Oh wow! You know that joke,
Yeah.
the joke about this guy dies and he goes to hell, and it's not people are eating beautiful food, and they're having fun and running through fields and dancing and laughing, and the guy goes, wow, this is hell. And the devil goes, yeah, it is. And then he sees this island out in the water, and it's fire, and people are screaming and they're tortured. And he goes, what's that? He goes, oh, that's the Catholics. They insist on it.
I love
Which
it.
is a really funny joke. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't want to upset anyone out there, but it's a funny joke.
We never said anything to our patients, only the patients that were like personal friends, because it is really risky. We did, we live in a small community. I've lost friends who I thought I could trust. They just, you cannot mess with people's core beliefs. If you mess with the core beliefs, I mean, you know how it is if you're a Republican and you talk Democrat, or if you're Democrat and you talk Republican, or if you buy a Ford and they like Chevys. I mean, people, you said it yourself, people don't want to be wrong. But when you mess with the core beliefs, ooh, they get ugly. It gets really ugly and scary.
Yeah, it's almost it's like death to somebody to have a core belief challenged. It's like
Yes.
if everything I've believed in my whole life is not 100% the truth, then my life is a waste, and I will have been the Walking Dead for X number of decades. So,
But isn't it
Right.
just that big fat ego of ours that's saying, I don't want to be wrong. How could I be wrong?
yeah, it's
How can you be right and me be wrong?
and this idea of a whole other realm, that this unseen realm that people uh, don't want to even acknowledge, or even acknowledge that it's a possibility,
Mhm.
is so terrifying, I think, to a lot of people. But it's and I'm sure the people that have turned their backs on you and or denigrated what you're doing actually
Mhm.
care about you, or did, in a way that is probably very uncomfortable for them too. And that may be
That's it.
might be part of the lesson for them to not be so entrenched, and be willing to be open to some new stuff. And it doesn't actually destroy their belief to know that you have this other experience. You can believe whatever you want.
That's
It
right.
doesn't necessarily make it a waste of time, but it might feel like that, like a visceral response to this.
So, Bob,
Or could it be that they're a little afraid that I could be right?
A lot afraid.
Yeah.
So-
Yes.
so-
That's scary.
so Bob, because you asked the question, and we do have one little chapter in our book that talks about 3 specific patients of mine.
Okay.
And I did have a whole bunch of patients that I told about meditation and the health benefits and things that I was changing, and they watched the weight drop off of me. And I had a set of patients that lost 30, 40, 50 pounds, all trying to do the same thing because they saw that it had a benefit. The spiritual side of this, and this will be interesting, that the most open conversations I had in my office, one was with a man who was a Muslim, who had foot wounds and issues, and he really wanted to make the pilgrimage to Mecca as his lifetime life goal, one of those pillars of Muslim.
Mm-hmm.
And because I was willing to have open, honest conversations about different religions and different experiences and etc., we had very long talks until we came up with a plan, special shoes, the accommodations that were legal for him to do in the Muslim faith, and he actually traveled to Mecca and made the trip. And part of that conversation was because sometimes as a physician, you have to be open-minded to everybody's viewpoint. Another one of those people that I had relatively open conversations with was a local Lutheran minister. And I've retired and he's retired, and we've kept in contact. And when his wife died, he called me because he wanted to know if I had a message from his wife. There's some spiritual belief, whether you're Muslim, Lutheran, Catholic, Jewish, atheist, whatever, that if you're open to the possibilities, there's more to our existence than just the day you're born and the day you die. Because if it's just the day that you're born and the day you die, really very much of this existence doesn't have a meaning.
Yeah, if you look at it that way, it just feels kind of pointless, which that is a philosophy of a lot of people.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a philosophy that hurts people too.
Yeah,
it allows you to do anything you want to anyone because this is the only existence, and so it's only this moment that matters. Now, in some reality, it is only this moment that matters. It is only this second that we're about to approach where we can make a decision or a choice.
And there's an unspoken feeling about existence that I guess it's a spiritual connection, and you can't really there's not quite a word for any of this stuff, but that's the part that I think some people miss in only living in what they would call, pragmatic reality. It doesn't, it misses that thing that is not really, there's not really a word for it. It's just, I guess it's being is about as best as I could get.
Part of that, Bob, is all people are scared of this word, but the word really is still faith. There's a reason. It doesn't have to be your faith in what, but you have faith that there's a reason. Does that make sense?
Makes sense to me. Yeah. And it really, and I'll just say this, when it comes down to being around the end of your own life or someone else's, the overriding feeling, at least this is the one I've had, is just love. That's all there is to any of it. It's, when my parents were passing away and other people, friends, everything else is stripped away. Character, the past, personality problems, difficulties. It really is just, I love you. And that's all you got. And that's what feels like faith to me, is that those two words seem to be very one and the same in that way. And certainly in those last moments of people's life on this, earth this way.
Yeah. The only thing I can do at this moment, because you're about to die, is let you know that you made a difference and that I love you.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
That's not a prediction, is it?
No.
I told you I'm not ready.
We never are we?
Yeah.
Well,
all death is premature is what my.
Oh
boy.
So what's so you guys, you promote your books in order to get this message out, and how, do you do lectures and tour? What do you do, or is it all?
Well,
through COVID, we've done a lot of podcasts.
Yeah, best way to get information out there.
The best way to reach out to people and try to make a difference. We taught meditation at the local university and senior centers and those kind of things because we could still get the message out to the general population through meditation, just on
to open your mind, period,
and be positive, and that love really does matter. If you go a little bit toward the Buddhist thought, is stripping all the preconceived thoughts that you've had. Realize that they're really indoctrination that we've learned over so many years, and that if you get in contact with yourself, you can start to see what realities really exist. And that's really part of all this lesson, is moving through toward, if you can accept the possibility that there are realities that you are not aware of, and that there's meaning that you're not aware of, then our journey here is to search for the meaning that you're not aware of.
Yeah. Yes, there's a lot of value in the seeking, I think.
And the seeking.
And
because it's really all about the path.
I'm always fascinated by this idea of it's like a collective ego thinking that our tiny little brains can that there's not things that our brains, which are pretty minimal in terms of the universe, can grasp. I mean, it's like a collective ego almost. Like, if we think it and we are able to think it, that's what it is. But even that's reality. But then as we move through time and develop as a species and find new things that people maybe 200 years ago would not even conceive of, well, are there things down the road in the future 200 years from now that we're saying, oh, that's impossible, that's not real, and then all of a sudden it is real because we figured it out. So
absolutely. Part of that, Bob, right now is the world is enamored with the idea of quantum physics.
Yes.
If you've noticed it, because they believe that the metaphysical theories that we're piling on top of this science is true. There's the science of quantum physics, and we're piling lots of metaphysical stuff because it seems to explain things in a physical sense way. And we can't really mentally grasp a non-physical sense. But as soon as we say, well, quantum physics says we're really both, actual matter, and we're actually both energy, and energy's non-physical. Well, energy really isn't non-physical. Energy's physical. We're just capturing this other idea as a way to explain. I must be in connection with a non-physical being. There must be another dimension, because there's a possible another dimension in quantum physics.
Well, and certainly some of the instrumentation to measure subtle energy has improved, so it's giving it a little bit more credence than it used to.
Correct.
And that's pretty interesting. It's because some people need the science piece in order to believe, to have faith.
Well, and a lot of times when I start talking about the quantum physics side of this, as soon as you talk to a scientist, they will start to tell you about chaos theory. That in reality, there should be no order. Everything should be a random accident. Yet there's order all the way through. And there's a pattern all the way through that science would not predict. There almost has to be something that orders the universe. And our minds cannot conceive of that.
No, I start to think about that stuff, and it's like the mind goes to the edge and then just stops, and I feel like
yeah, it becomes layers on layers of impossibility.
I don't even bother with it because it makes me crazy. It's like trying to think about infinity. We'll go beyond that one. Go beyond that.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yet we're trying to use science to describe infinity.
Not just here, for the experience.
That's an interesting idea too, and is that that there is a purpose that maybe we don't even understand yet. That's really big, really. But I don't know where I was going with that. My mind shut off again right there.
It's okay, Bob.
I think it's really big enough that we have to overcome conceit, selfishness, jealousy, and always be forgiveness and loving. Isn't that big enough?
It is
it's
big.
Huge.
All right. I want the
gigantic.
Come on, audience, start doing what Carla just said. Let's go. Let's go, people. I have to say, I loved this conversation. I feel, not to be like silly, but I feel like I've known you guys for a long time, other than just today.
Don't be silly, because we have found in many of the podcasts we've done that we have a past life connection. We had a past life with the hosts, and I'm sure we'll find you, because we always do.
Well, let me know if there's anything that
and we're always meant to meet the people we run into in this life.
Well, fantastic. I so appreciate your time and the work you're doing. You guys are lovely people, and I know my audience will totally appreciate this this podcast, and I look forward to talking to you again down the road.
Thank you.
Thanks.
It was nice to be here with you.
You too. Have a great day. Appreciate you guys listening. Hope you enjoyed that episode. I sure did. I love those guys, David and Carla. Great talk. And please check out my website, theexplodinghuman.com, and you can listen to all the episodes there, read bios on all my guests, see photos of my guests. You can donate to the show to support us if you want to do that. Also, there's a Patreon extra content thing going on, and that is patreon.com/theexplodinghuman. Check that out. Hope you like that stuff. It's some interviews, and I'm going to be adding some extra content that's not on this regular old podcast. So I appreciate you listening in. Also, The Exploding Human with Bob Nickman on YouTube, and check out the Facebook page. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.